Hi, my name is Siobhan, and I'm here to help you find your next favorite book and your next favorite author. And I am so excited to be with Tia Love today. She is an indie author who specializes in layered Black romances that center women who are loved relentlessly and the men who are obsessed with them,
I like
flaws and all. Her catalog includes characters you will root for and steamy encounters that you will want to savor. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I loved that introduction. I love the concept of Black women being loved relentlessly. I might need to add that. I love that.
Yes, you definitely do. I would love to start just to get a sense on what first sparked your love for storytelling.
Um, Growing up, reading was my thing. It was my go-to. So, full transparency, I got an ADHD diagnosis when I was 5. And my father is one of those, he's one of those older Black men who did not trust government, did not trust, necessarily medicating children. So he wouldn't medicate me. And so like his focus was kind of like on a more holistic approach.
Mm.
And as I'm learning with my children, like there are things you can do to kind of, not necessarily, you can't cure it, right? Like it's the executive functioning, it's a different kind of executive functioning. So you have to find a way around it. And so like his method was channeling my energy, my hyperactivity into reading at a very young age. So like by 4, I was like just eating them up. And so when I was in middle school, when I was in elementary, I got my first library card, of course. But like when I was in middle school is when he started to leave me alone at the library. Like he would drop me off on like Saturday. I'm gonna come pick you up in a couple hours. And so I was by myself. So I was over there in the adult section where all of the Black authors were like, and so that kind of was, I always loved storytelling. I loved books. I loved disappearing into different worlds. I read Harry Potter. What else did I read? Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys, all of it. And then I stumbled upon all of these Black authors telling these like very specific Black stories. And I was like, oh, okay, this is different. And so like it kind of like shot my love for storytelling like to a completely different level. I have not come down off that pedestal since middle school. I have not.
What were some of those that you were initially drawn to when you were dabbling in the adult section of the library?
So of course, Sister Soldier, she was a Black woman. Cold Swimmer Ever was making its rounds at that time. So definitely her, like I believe I know like The Coldest Winter Ever is the book I read that after I finished it, I was like, oh, this is what I'm gonna do for the rest of my life. Like I'm gonna write books. So definitely Sister Soldier. And Eric Jerome Dickey was another big one who I kind of I poured through his catalog. He has so much. So him and her kind of ruled my universe at that time. And then as I got older, I got into the Omar Tyree and who else? The Tracy Brown. There's another one I'm thinking. Oh, Zane. I read Zane, of course. So really all of the foundational,
yes,
elements,
the very adult ones over there.
We all know, like we can all.
Yes.
Then once I got to high school, actually, I started reading. I can't remember the name of the imprint, but I started reading like, well, I guess what I would refer to as like contemporary romance at the time. So like that's when I was introduced to Brenda Jackson and Rochelle Ehlers, and there's another one that I used to read. I cannot remember her name, but it shifted from like an urban, because like a lot of the books at the library at that time were very like street lit, urban lit, which I love. And then I discovered all of this like soft contemporary type Black romance, and I kind of, again, elevated to another level.
Yeah, I can definitely tell those influences in your storytelling. Especially Bible study, which we will talk about that one.
I love it.
Because you know how much I love Bible study.
Yes. It brought us together.
Yes, yeah, to have like that mix of like the urban with like the contemporary elements as well, definitely. I remember also being really gravitated gravitating to BB Moore Campbell as well.
Yes, that was another one. Yes, yes.
Yes, of like, not all of hers were like romance, but just like people going through
giving
things
you that slice
like
of
trying to
Black life.
navigate it.
Like just, and I remember reading books like that, like BB, like hers, and being like, I can't wait to be an older Black woman. I can't wait to be in my 30s. You know, I just was so excited.
Yeah.
So yeah, all of them, like, because it wasn't always just romance. It was just like Black life, like, and not like literary fiction, which is more like, you know, Toni Morrison, Octavia Butler, and so like I love those too, but that requires a much more critical lens, I feel like, to read through, and I love them, but I don't place those in the same category.
Yeah, it's different because then it's just amazing. Like, we have so many options. There definitely should be more.
Yeah.
That's another conversation, but to be able to just like dive in and peek into just the diversity of like Black lives, whether it's like more urban or more contemporary, or like a more critical view of just like how race and different social circumstances creates who we are. So yeah, I definitely really appreciate learning a little bit more about what influenced you, so that I could see like, where can I see this potentially in your work. So you mentioned about like really loving storytelling at a young age and diving into Black literature. So how did this shift come from being like a reader and like really loving the stories to actually like crafting your own stories?
So I started writing them books right after I finished Coldest Winter Ever. I hopped in my notebook. Okay. I hopped in my notebook very, very early in life. And of course, like most young girls, I wrote fan fiction. And at the time I was really in love with Pharrell. And so my fan fiction was about Pharrell. Oh my goodness.
And his slim waist. That's what my friends tell me. Just
you already know,
white man.
It was, girl, so it was about him. So I spent the bulk of middle school writing about Pharrell, right? And then I just kept doing it. And so my father, you know, so I also wrote poetry, and so I did not allow him to read my fan fiction, but I would share like my poems and stuff with him, and like little short stories I had written. And he's like, you know, you're a really good writer. I think that, you know, you can probably take this far, but this is not how you make money in life. This is not how you rise out of poverty. And so it was kind of like emotionally supported, but not really viewed as like this is not your path. And so for a very long time, it was just a hobby. And so I have so many stories on my computer, on my notebooks, that it's just stuff that I've written because the stories live inside me and they have to have somewhere to go. And so my first book, Afrodisiac, which I published January 2020, came to be because I had been writing it at that point for 4 years. And my husband, he was just like, you know, what do you have to lose by putting it out? You know, and so at that point, indie publishing was on a rise. It was still, you know, a few years in, still kind of new, but it was still an option for like being able to take control of that process. I don't have to wait for anybody to tell me yes, just do it. And so, you know, I did. And I wrote, because I had so many stories just sitting in the tuck. I think I published like 4 or 5 books shortly after that. And then I went and found the indie community, because I had never read an indie book before I published my own, because I was not aware of this vast community. And so I went looking for other Black indie writers. And then I started reading Black indie authors. And that shifted my practice and my consumption. At this point, I feel like I exclusively read Black indie authors. And that's how we're here today. Like, I don't know if I would have continued to publish if I hadn't found that community.
Yeah, that's amazing, and we can definitely thank your husband for encouraging you.
I am grateful.
Encouraging you to just take a chance. That's also a really interesting time period in general to release a book of like January of 2020 and not knowing what would happen.
Listen, I had been married for 3 months. So I was in my honeymoon phase and I was trying for a baby. So I only had my oldest at that point. And 2 months after the book came out, the pandemic, like the government shut everything down. And so like I went from working because I worked in social work at that time. And so my 9 to 5 was now exclusively at home, and I got pregnant. And so it all happened in that year where it's just like, it was almost like and this is never to downplay COVID, right? Because it was a terrible time, but like it was a perfect storm of circumstances for the author Tia Love to be born. And I do think that it happening at that point in time is one of the reasons, another reason why I continue to publish, because I'm always write, but maybe not always publish. So
yeah, definitely. And then I think probably it could have created an opportunity for readers who are also stuck in the house to discover your work as well, and have more time. They discovered
my work and they discovered me, because they found that first book. So I didn't understand from a writer's perspective the romance genre. Of course, I have been reading romance all these years, but I didn't know that you had to have a happily ever after, because I personally view romance differently. And so my first book ended with the couple not together, which was okay with me, but the readers did not like that. And they found me and they made sure that I knew that they didn't like it. And they ate me up so bad. And so the second book I published was the part 2, which is now they're combined into one book, but it was a part 2 to that book to kind of satisfy the readers. But I remember I'm pregnant, I'm nauseous, I could barely get out of bed, and I'm like reading comments in my Facebook group like, girl, when is this next book coming? I'm like, when was there supposed to be a next book? Like, what are we talking about?
That is hilarious. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Afrodisiac then. Okay. Since I've only read it when they've been together, and if it stopped at the part that I think it stopped, I think I probably would have threw my I think I would have thrown my Kindle across the room, because why would you do that?
In my mind, I was thinking like it's the romance of loving and choosing yourself. She said she wasn't gonna deal with that shit, and so that was how I viewed it. And the reader was like, absolutely not.
No,
absolutely not. And so And so when I go back and I read it sometimes, I'm just like, this second part is, and I do like it. Like I love, how they navigated that and ended up together. But I was like, and I feel like had I known at the time, like the genre standard, I might have just put it under like women's fiction.
Yes. Yeah.
Instead of because I was trying to tell a very specific story when I first wrote that book. And it didn't involve them getting back together.
Gotcha.
So that was that part 2 is really me it's me learning from my readers. I'm glad they ate me up. I felt a little abused and harmed at first, but I was glad for that immediate feedback, because without it, who knows where I would be today.
So what was your original intention with Morgan's story? For those that haven't read Afrodisiac, she is very set in using men casually and does not want to have anything more than what they could provide physically. She has a flourishing bookstore and she's loving her life, and things take a turn.
They do. She meets her match, right?
Yes.
And he's just like, I see where you're coming from, but I'm coming from somewhere else. And if you want to deal with me on this level, and kind of so he entrances her, he dates her, which she's not used to, right? Because she is using men casually. And so, of course, they fall, right? But my intention, my true intention was to show a journey of a woman. It was kind of my personal philosophy at work, I want to say. And like in my personal philosophy, especially when it comes to romance with the opposite sex, is like to achieve what you want out of a relationship, if that's what you're looking for, you have to have standards that you don't deviate from, no matter what. It's not about how good you look. It's not about your body. It's not about how much money you have. It's about whatever your standard is, whatever your boundary is, remaining firm and never folding. And so it was showing her folding, right? And that worked for her for a while. And then here comes this, the other shoe, right?
Yeah,
the complication, which is a natural complication.
Yes.
And the consequences of that and hurt. And I feel like, it's reasonable for other women to be like, this is an okay shoe to drop. Like, it's fucked up how it dropped, but it's an okay shoe to drop. We can continue forward. But it was really me just showing like, this is what it looks like when a woman stands on a very specific kind of business. And then on the flip side, because I was a single mother for a long time, 5 years. I was a single mother for 5 years. And so it was also showing like, how do you approach being a single parent in dating, but doing it from the male perspective? Because I was raised by a single father. So it was, kind of a blend. A lot of it was just a blend of like personal experiences, personal philosophies, and like how they played out. And like me personally, I would have left too. Me, right? But like the girl's like, yeah, but not me. Okay, get her back with that me.
Yes, she was like, actually, I'll go back to the streets.
I'll go back to the streets. I'm cool. You should have left me. You should have left me alone. Actually, I was cool over here. So that was my intention. But I do like where I was forced to take it.
Yeah. What do you want to leave readers with now that it has like that happily ever after, so folks can unclench and be okay if they're picking up a romance and reading it? What do you want readers now to feel like if they're just picking it up for the first time, like feel after reading that story?
That one, there is a lid for every pot. Relationships are not a one size fits all situation. They are very, very highly customizable. Confidence is key. And the true romance for me, and what I try to write in all of my books, not just Afrodisiac, is like being seen, fully seen by a person who wants you, who loves you, who is involved with you, being like truly seen, and then that person not choosing to love you in spite of those things, but choosing to love you because of those things. Like I think there's a big difference of somebody being like, like my husband is white, so there's a difference of him being like, I love you even though you're Black. And then I love you because you're a Black woman, right? Those are two different kinds of ways to approach the relationship. And so like that is the through line in every single book that you pick up for me. Is just like you said, Black women being loved relentlessly. And I think in that being loved relentlessly is seeing that like Black women show up in so many different ways, and every single way that they show up, they deserve to be loved and worshipped.
Yeah, I love that. And then of the books of yours that I've read, like I know that I can expect like the woman to be very strong, independent. Like she has her own mind about like how she wants to live her life. Going about it however she wants to. But then there is also like they're also very deeply human. So like there's no like super women, I'll put it that way, where it's like this is like, we know it's fiction, but there's a lot of like realness and rawness in your characters that I really appreciate. And I'm just interested to know like what draws you to like crafting these types of women as opposed to like a Claire Huxtable type of woman. That's the way that I'll put it.
That's a good question. And a really, really good like analogy or kind of contrast. So I'm a strong Black woman, right? I was raised by a single father. I did not have a lot of like motherly or feminine influence in my life growing up. And so I grew up with a very masculine disposition. And as I'm older now, I'm understanding that like everybody has masculine traits, everybody has feminine traits. Like there is no one way, no perfect way to lean as a woman. But growing up, that was like a source of insecurity for me, because all of these things that I'm watching my friends navigate and learn at the feet of their mothers and their grandmothers and their aunts, I'm like, either I'm reading books, and that's probably like the closest place where I'm learning all of these things, these worldly things. And so when I got older, and as soon as I was able to, I like started surrounding myself with other Black women. Mm-hmm. I love, and if you follow me on social media, I love Black women. I love them so. I love being a Black woman. I love because existing with other Black women, I just love everything that we do. And so like it comes from one, just a deep study of Black women, because that's what I had to do to kind of learn how to operate in the world as a Black woman, because like I said, I didn't have that growing up. So like just a deep study and observing of Black women in general, just across the diaspora, age group, generation, and then like developing a serious love for Black women. And I was raised in poverty, and like Black women who live in poverty are a lot different from the Claire Huxtables, because they have to, so much of what they do is rooted in survival, you know what I'm saying? And not necessarily in spaces where they can thrive and explore all of these lovely facets of motherhood, or these lovely facets of womanhood and a career. And so I love showing those kinds of women, not necessarily who are in poverty, but who have that survival mindset. Mm-hmm. And of being strong, headstrong, which is what everybody who's ever dated me has ever called me. Headstrong, I buck the system, independent, all of those things, mouthy, and showing that they are just as worthy of love as a woman who adds sugar on top of her shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, because like sometimes it's nice to read, and it's like someone who is more aspirational, but I know like for me, I get drawn to like people who are real, even though it is fiction. Like these people are not real, but where it is like grounded in like that sense of truth. And like you mentioned, when you're really focused on surviving, or just like trying to navigate these systems that do not want us anyway, like you don't have the luxury to be like, oh, I'm just going to relax.
You don't have
into
the luxury.
This love. Like you're going to be skeptical,
because I just got off work. I gotta go, and so it's just like,
yes.
What does it look like when that kind of woman is dating, or somebody's trying to date her? Mm-hmm. And that's really what I try to envision. Like you said, a lot of my female characters are very headstrong. They're living lives on their terms, and I believe most of the books that I've written, the woman starts in the space where she's just like, I'm not really focused on that right now. Like there's not even no space in my life for that. I got all of this going on. And showing a man who is like, I love all of that you have going on. How can I take some of it off of your plate? Mm-hmm. Whether that's financially, emotionally, mentally, whatever. But like I do believe that true companionship kind of comes in and moves a woman from the space where she feels like she has to be super strong, bullheaded, to a space where I can relax a little bit. I ain't got to yell today, unless I just like to yell, because some people just like to yell.
Yes. Yes. And then in each of your stories, like you definitely do get a sense of them being able to like lean in, like take a deep breath with whoever their love interest is. And I would love to know like your thought process on crafting like your male characters as well, to have like that balance, but then still have that same line of like they're not actively trying to change the woman that's the center of the story as well.
I draw a lot of inspiration from my marriage, just in like I said, I'm every woman is me. I am very strong-headed. So all of those things, those qualities that are a through line in my female character, they exist in me. And so I you know, I never planned to get married. I never thought it was never a goal, and I definitely didn't think it was a possibility because of all of the stuff I used to hear when I was dating. I was just like, well, I'm not giving up paying my own bills. I'm not giving up cussing the motherfucker out when they got me messed up. I'm not giving those things up to be with a man. I'm just not doing that. And so, you know, I had told God, I was like, you know, if you want me to be paired off, you're gonna have to bring him like this. Otherwise, I'm cool with just being, you know, for the streets, essentially.
Yes.
And so when I'm writing I always craft my female character first, and then go create a man who is worthy, who is a balance to whoever she is, right? And so, like, if there is a very, very soft woman who is nurturing a wound, right? Then create a man who is hard in all of the places that's needed to help her nurture that wound and heal. And so that's really all it comes from, is just like, here's this woman, here's her wounds, here's her insecurities. What would it look like for her to be in love and it look healthy? And then build a man who fits that.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that. And it sounded like you were describing Preston, and we could just take a moment to celebrate Mr. Preston Nash, because it's so funny, because I see all this commentary about book boyfriends or husbands or book babes or things like that. And I don't see him come up nearly enough, but I don't say anything because he's already taken. So you can talk about whoever.
Right. Let them have that.
Y'all can have whoever y'all want.
You ain't got to fuss and fight with nobody about it.
Right. Exactly. And I just loved how he shows up for Genesis and in all of the ways in Bible study. I actually just finished rereading it. Ooh. And I reread it via audio.
Oh, yes.
And
yes,
it was amazing.
Good choice.
It was just so good. And just like you said, like, just the epitome of like finding who her perfect match was. Because if she was paired up with Brandon, for example, that would not have worked. That would not have worked at all. So I love just the intentionality you have of like making sure like that male character matches up with the woman that's at the center of it.
Exactly. And that's sometimes, and so like my writing process is longer than, you know, some of my peers. And a part of that is because I'm trying to make sure that like, for me, I want to make sure that I'm not just like these characters aren't interchangeable. Like you said, Brandon could never date Genesis. Tim could never date Calliope. Like, it's just, everybody is paired off with the person they are supposed to be with, and that just requires a level of characterization. And I'm a very character-driven author. I talk to one of my author friends about this all the time because she's very plot forward, and I think that is probably what makes writing easier for a lot of people, is that I'm not a plot-driven author. Sometimes the plot does not reveal itself to me. I'm just like, I got these two people who they need to be together. How do I make them kiss? That's me figuring out the plot is like, how do I make them kiss for the first time? And then what happens after that? So like, I think that characterization is so important. And then to your point about Preston not being mentioned as one of the book bays, I think right now we're in a very specific space for what the girls want to see from a man in a book. And Preston, he got that in him, but it's, you know, he just got out of prison. He can't go back.
No, please.
You know? So
he does not need to go back. He's learned. Yes. He's learned and grown.
He has learned and grown. You know, so he's like, look, I've already been in the chokey. I'm not trying to go back. Especially after I just, you know, and also God gave me a message. I have to get right to get this woman. So
yeah, I definitely appreciate him because he knew immediately, and then it was like, okay, what do I need to do to be ready for her? I just love everything about that.
That is my favorite trope in a book. specifically with a male character approaching a female character. It's just like, you know, immediately. And the rest of the book is you figuring out how you finna just orbit her. That's it. Like, she is my wife. She doesn't know it. I can't tell her that yet because we just met. What do I need to do? What needs to be taken care of right now? How do we develop that relationship? I love that trope so much in books. I guess it's a micro trope. I love it.
Yes. Yeah. Him falling first and hard. And then it's like, hold on. Okay. What do I need to do to change my life? So that way it's an easy yes for her.
Yeah.
Which is a much different approach than if it's just like, I'm just going to throw money at her or throw,
which for some characters that might work.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Some characters might be like, money is my love language. This is the perfect idea. You have my attention. But for Genesis, she's just like, you are everything I'm praying away from. So there's that hurdle that he's not even aware of. So, something as simple as continue to go to Bible study, because he just showed up to Bible study just to please his grandma.
Yes.
Now you're going again and again and again and again.
Yes. And tangling it up with algebra.
Who's getting into it with algebra? You didn't have to offend that man like that. It absolutely was not necessary. It absolutely was not necessary.
That was, he was not going to have anyone stand in the way of him with his woman. So
it was basically him like, I don't know what y'all have going on, nor do I care. I'm taking her for breakfast in the morning. Do with that information what you will.
Yes. I feel like that's another micro trope of like,
I do love it.
That moment where it's like the trio, the unlikely trio is together and it's like she has to make a choice. Like, which gentleman are you going to lean towards?
He's like, don't worry, I'm going to make the choice for everybody involved. He walked in with that much. You ain't got to say nothing. I have made the decision. I love that. Those micro tropes, I'm gonna eat it up in every single book, mine and others included.
Yes, definitely. And you mentioned about like being very like character driven and really getting into like who these characters are as people in order to like craft their stories. And I saw, even though they're different, I did see some similarities to Morgan from Afrodisiac in Genesis.
Did you really?
And like how they approach life. Like Morgan was like, what I'm going to do is not allow anyone to have power over me.
Yeah.
Based on what she's been through. And then Genesis did the opposite of like, I can't trust myself to make decisions. So now all of these people who shouldn't have power over how I'm moving and like what I'm deciding to do. I would love to know, like, if they actually met in person, what do you think Morgan could teach Genesis and Genesis could teach Morgan?
That's a really good question. That I've never been asked something like that before. That's a really, really good one. I think that Morgan could definitely emphasize the importance of like the loudest voice in your head should be your own. The other voices will exist, your parents, your friends, critics, all that. They would like, you can't get rid of them. So the loudest voice should be your own, and like you got to strengthen your inner compass. And her sister Ruth kind of told her some of that a little bit as well. It's just like you cannot be ruled by fear. And so that would probably be Morgan's messaging to her. It's just like you can't live for other people. The loudest voice in your head should be your own. And then Genesis to Morgan. Well, that's interesting because in both of those books, both of their men kept a secret from them. Now, Bible Study Special Edition, current Bible Study doesn't deal with the secret. Bible Study Special Edition does. And so it could be Genesis messaging to Morgan would probably be to allow Gillespie to right his wrong. or at least speak to him, allow him to give you whatever he's supposed to give you about that, right? Like you cannot just dismiss him without any input. You're not hearing the man out.
Hung up on him and she was like, it's done.
It's done.
I don't have
ever
to
talk to me again. I listen. She meant it. She did. She meant it. And he learned this. She not one of them. But that would probably be Genesis' mission, is just like, if you truly do love him, like you say you do, a big part of love is making space for him to like right his wrong. And maybe he can't. Maybe he comes to you and he says something and you're like, that's not enough for me. And that's okay. You still have that right, but you cannot just completely eliminate your chance for something real and true without first hearing all of the information. Like just making an informed decision.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also probably just like having faith in love a little bit as well, like for the both of them.
Yeah.
Of just like, you have to take a risk to have this reward.
Yeah.
Which is like,
high risk,
high
risk, high reward. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I would love to talk a little bit more about Bible study, especially since it's at the top of my brain from having.
I love Bible study. Listen, I was just in mine.
Yes. From having reread. And let's back up to how it was even available for free at a time. I was like, wait, hold on. After reading, I was like, wait, this is being given away for free? Like, how did that even come to be, as far as like that collaboration and like putting the story out there?
The last thing I published before this, the last book I published was #currently untitled. And then at the time, Kindle Vella was still a thing. And so I was kind of like testing that out. And so I was doing an episodic series also in Langston Lake. It's called Desperate. And so it's like kind of like my spin on Desperate Housewives. I don't know if you're familiar with the franchise. I loved it so much. I love it. And so that was kind of like, it was me stretching my creative abilities. And then before I had got reached out to about that giveaway, I had wrote like a short synopsis for a short story called Bible Study based on a tweet I had saw where this man with some goals in his mouth and just like his shirt open and his chain dangling on his chest. And he said he was on his way to Bible study. And I was just like, this is blasphemy.
It's like, oh, that's who's going? Wait, which one?
What church are you going to? And so I remember the day because I immediately screenshotted the tweet and then I immediately went into a Word document and just like started typing up a bunch of like thoughts and then I just pushed it to the side. So I have like a folder of like unfinished ideas, like, and I have them split by like short story, novel, series. And so then I pushed it to the side and kind of forgot about it. And then I got approached about the giveaway. And so at the time, I was outlining a story, a secret baby story, also happening in Langston Lake, because this is a universe I'm trying to expand on. And so I was like, oh, I'm already working on this thing. I'll just give it, and it was supposed to be a short story, but I'm not a short story author. I try every single time. I'm like, I could just do 25,000 to 30,000 words. No. It'll be 30,000 words before they kiss. And so it's just like, please stop playing. Like, please stop playing yourself. And so I put the secret baby story on hold because I was like, well, this is not going to be a short story. It's just not. And so then I went back into I was like, oh, let's do the Bible study thing. And I didn't want to give away something because I didn't necessarily know if it was going to really have a big return on investment for me. And so I was like, well, I don't want to give away something that I know is going to like really, really hype my readers up, or something I know is going to like hit the market and go be really good. So I'm going to just do like a cute little throwaway idea, enter Bible study. And so I started outlining and then I started writing. And so then I reached the 42,000 word mark. Now the story is only supposed to be 40,000. they hadn't even kissed. And so I was like, okay, here we are again. And so I reached out to the organizer. I'm like, hey, is this a hard stop on the 40,000 words, or is there room? She was like, you know what? Do what you got to do. Perfect. Love that for me. And so then I just kind of I ran with it. And what it is now, it's similar to what I outlined originally, but it's also so much more than that. And so when I put it out, I knew it was a good book, but I was just like, it's fine. Like, you know, maybe people will fuck with it, maybe they won't. And I just put it out there, and I kind of was like, okay, well, whatever. And it's so crazy because it was free for like 6 months. And
yes, a very long time for some. I just have to pause you to think that this was a throwaway idea. My mind cannot even process.
I think about that all the time.
Like, I'll just put this together, and you know, whatever happens. I just don't even understand.
That's really it was crazy how it because I was just like, yeah, it's just a cute little idea. Like when I'll just return to this later. It's fine. It's not a big deal. Because usually, you know, because I'm also not a religious woman. So I'm just like, this is just something fun. It's just something fun. I'm not taking it serious. I take everything I write serious. I'm not going to take it serious. It's just fun. Me having, you know, laughing at this man's Twitter or whatever. And then the reader started talking to me. And I was like, oh my God. This has been my face since April of last year, basically. Because I was not expecting it to like, I knew my readers, like people who already knew about me or like who had been following me, newsletter, I knew they would like it because it's my story. And so like my writing is in there. And if you like my writing, you're going to like the book. But I did not expect it to cast such a wide net. So.
Yes. Well, I am thankful for this throwaway idea, which still does not make any sense to me at all. So if whatever other throwaway ideas you have, you need to just go on ahead and flesh those out. If this is a throwaway,
you're right. You're right.
Yeah, I really love it, and I'm just really interested in what your approach was for this story. Since you said like you're not a religious person, I'm not a religious person as well. I've like floated around religion, but there was just so many elements in this story that just like really make you reflect on just like faith and like what does that actually mean, and if it is actually tied to obedience. And like what does that actually look like? So I would love to know like what your thought as you were like fleshing out this idea, like how did you weave in those elements to like bring Genesis to life?
Okay, so Genesis is like she's a collection of all of the Black women I know, which most of the Black women I know raised in church. You know, some of my closer friends have had similar struggles to Genesis. So I'm very familiar with it. And I am the exact opposite. I have the loudest voice in my head is my own. And so like, and my relationship to God is much different because I come from a strictly spiritual lens and not a religious lens. And so I'm able to, you know, when we're talking, you know, about some of the things Genesis was talking about, I'm like, how, you know, I like the nigga with the goals, but the nigga with the goals is too much. And it's just like, I'm able to come in and not necessarily, you ain't got to walk on my side of things. Well, let's consider a middle ground, right? And so kind of like being, not, I won't say the voice of reason, but like being a voice from the outside looking in. And being able to like, you know, I hear where you coming from, but have you considered X, Y, and Z? And because I'm not religious, when I read the Bible, I have a different takeaway than, you know, maybe some of my religious friends. And so like that really, really helped kind of like develop this character who is very heavily in the church and is using, and a lot of the women I know as adults, their relationship to God it's more of a what's the word I want to use? It is less about the faith and the principles of Christianity and more about this is a thing that controls me and stops me from doing things that maybe I shouldn't be doing. And so, like, if you feel like you have a very lustful spirit, which I think as a 30+ woman is natural. There are women who feel like, well, that just needs to be prayed away. And it's like, no, you just need to come. That's where I come from, right? Yeah. And so, like, finding that balance of like, okay, let's not go too harsh, let's not go too far over here, and let's not go too far over here. Let's find a middle ground. And so, like, Genesis was really kind of like my faith in God is real, and my beliefs as a Christian are real, and my morals are very strong. But my relationships in the church is specifically about controlling what I believe is controlling me. And I think that a lot of women can, even if they're not religious, a lot of women can relate to that in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's about relationships, it's about food and diet, career, children. There are so many things that women grapple with when it comes to like, this thing is controlling my life and I need a way to get this shit under control.
Yeah. And also, I think sometimes that could also look like, if I feel that some things in my life are out of control, let me cling to something that I feel has ultimate control.
Yep.
Of like, okay, well, if I follow these rules, if I'm living up to what the expectations are, then I should be rewarded with the life that I want.
Exactly. Yeah.
When that's not exactly how things go.
No.
And that's another conversation of just like, you know, when you don't have that life that you want and you've been living a certain way, you think it's tied to your obedience and your faith, then you get disgruntled.
Yeah. And that's why the book starts. So originally the book was supposed to start with her at the library and she gets that text message from her mom right before she goes to Bible study. So it originally started that way. But then I was like, no, I want to show her being like living the life that she prayed for, which was she's on this date with this pristine, perfect Christian man. And she's just like, this is the most boring fucking thing God could have ever put in front of my face.
She basically said him being handsome was a waste. That's basically
it's a waste. Because what are we doing? I don't even want to just sit here and look at you. That's how bored I am, you know? And so, like, really, really showing that contrast of you did pray for this and God brought it to you, but not because he is the one. God brought it to you so that when you did get the thing that you wanted, or when the man that you wanted walked through the door in Bible study, it's a lot easier, though it was still a journey for her to understand that, like, oh, God sent him too. This is what I prayed for. But you only realize that if you have the contrast of, well, I did date the perfect Christian man who's in church every Sunday and checks off all of these boxes, and it just wasn't enough. I wasn't moved in any way, not spiritually, physically, emotionally. It just didn't move me. And then you meet a man in the course of spiritual study, and he's checking off every box and then some.
And some that you were trying to hide as well.
Some that you were trying, but God knows your heart. God knows your.
Exactly. What
you might have thought that you wasn't supposed to be with a bad boy, but God said, "Don't worry, I got you. Don't worry, my child. I got you.
He'll be reformed. It's okay.
He will be reformed. Is that not what we all want? Just a reformed bad boy?
Yeah.
Come on.
Exactly.
I too love a man with neck tattoos. I get it. I do.
You don't have to hide, because if it's Mr. Nash, he will come find you, like, immediately.
Yep, he gonna come find you and he gonna come get you. You ain't got to worry about, do I tell him? You don't have to do anything. Don't worry, I got this. I love it. Don't worry, I got this kind of situation. I do.
Yes, definitely. And then within Genesis' journey and like just being able to reconcile like what happened in her past and like how she actually wants to move forward, instead of letting like her obedience to her parents like weigh down on her. I definitely appreciated like having that context of her family. And I want to say probably in my original review, I had some words for her mother. For her mother.
Everybody has words for her. Everybody has words for her.
Yes.
As we should, because she was on some things. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm interested to see, is that something that gets elaborated? I know with the special edition that's coming out, a little bit more of that.
Yeah. So we get to see, because Genesis did learn to set some boundaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we get to see that boundary crossed and the consequences of that in the special edition. Because a lot of the reviews and the comments are like, the mama need hands and feet. And I'm just like, yeah, I agree. I do. But it's a lot more complex than that, right? Yes. And so a woman's relationship with her mother is anybody's relationship with their mother. That's your relationship, your introduction to God, your introduction to love or lack thereof. And so it's not an easy cord to cut, no matter what. And so that's a through line in all of my books as well. It's gonna be a mother wound. Mm-hmm. I love to write a mother wound. And so I did revisit that because I got a lot of feedback about the mother not getting hands and feet.
Yeah, it was like, okay, we could do a little more here.
We could do a little more. And so I think about like if other characters in my catalog were in that situation, right? Mm-hmm. Like if it was a Tim situation, it would have been handled quickly, wrapped up in a pretty little bow. Yeah. But we're dealing with Genesis, who is, very freshly out of not religious psychosis, but like that form of like using religion as control and like breaking free from her parents, control and wanting to please them and all of that. Like she's just freshly out of that. Mm-hmm. And so like we can't expect her to do that. I feel like what she did do fit her character. And then Preston, everybody's so cool, like Preston should do. And I'm just like, yeah. Also, Preston is freshly out of prison. Preston is currently reestablishing himself as an empire builder. He is trying to walk a very fine line between bad boy and good Christian man. Mm-hmm. And he's also giving Genesis autonomy in that. And just like, I'm going to follow your lead in how you deal with this. And I feel like that conversation that he had with her at the restaurant right before she talked to her mom was really kind of him signaling like, I could knock all of this shit over if you want me to. Yes. I can absolutely do that. Mm-hmm. But we will do it your way for right now. Mm-hmm. And so like me, the writer, I think that their responses, though not as gratifying, do fit their character and where they're at in the story.
Yes, because if he is going to be with Genesis long term, then he has to learn like what is the best way for her to handle things as well, because then it'll turn into now he's the one handling all of her complications as opposed to her growing into her own to be able to set boundaries or do whatever is needed as well. Definitely.
Yeah.
I definitely do want to also chat a little bit about the I Can Have It All series as well. I love a workplace romance and all of the Sim siblings. It just, they don't have to look anywhere else. They're like, who's here? And let me snap them up.
Let me snatch them up real quick.
Right.
Yes.
What was the inspiration for that series? Did you intend for it to follow each of the siblings initially, or did it like grow from there?
So it was never supposed to be a series.
Okay.
Period. I wrote Professional Pleasure right after Afrodisiac. It was me trying to write a short story for Valentine's Day. And as you can see, it is not that. And it was kind of where I was just kind of starting to realize, like, okay, you might not be a short story writer, and that's okay. And so then I finished it, and I loved it. They got their happily ever after. We got a cute little epilogue. But then the characters started talking to me. Maybe like 4 or 5 months later, they started like, and they wouldn't shut up. And I was like, y'all are actually supposed to be like off living the dream. What are we talking about here? And yes, I do be talking to the characters. I do be like, it's kind of like therapy with them. Like, okay, what is the actual problem here? And so me realized, like, oh, y'all have a marriage in trouble. Well, that might be interesting to write. And so then that's how Executive Entanglements was born. And then it was also supposed to stop right there. Because remember, I never planned out a series. It was just like, these are just books that are coming to me. And so like Executive Entanglements, and I was planning to be done. But as I neared the end of Executive Entanglements, Tim started talking. Natalia started talking. I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And so I outlined it. And I was like, well, we'll see. And at that point I had a Patreon. And so I started just like sharing some of the stuff I was writing, and they were eating it up. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess this is going to be a book. And so it's been written over the span of my entire career as an author since 2020. Currently entitled came out in 2023, I believe, the end of 2023 or 2024. And it came out like 2 or 3 years after Executive Entanglements. And so like there's a big jump in my writing ability. And so like when I go back and I read those or I listen to them, I'm just like, this is so fascinating because there's so much detail in #currently entitled that does not exist in those other 2 books. Not because those details aren't valid throughout the series, but because I just didn't have the talent and the skill to know that like you should be including these things across these books. But because I also never planned for it to be a series. And now I'm writing the 4th and final book in the series.
Final for sure. Are you sure? In case someone talks to you again. Because maybe somebody has something to say.
You know, and hopefully not, because I have some other things coming down that I want to come down the pipeline. But these siblings got to let me go. Because what I will say, after #currently entitled, I love Tim and Natalia so much. I think they might be my favorite couple. And I was in a slump after I wrote it. And so just to feel something, I tried to write a short story about them. And I did. It's nothing I would ever publish, but I did. And I was like, oh, this could be a book. But then Portia started talking. I was like, oh no, this is way more important.
Yeah, I really enjoyed all of them. But one thing I'll say is for Callie and Brandon, that Executive Entanglements, I think that's might have been my first Marriage in Trouble book. And I was like, oh, I need more of these.
Yes.
This is really
I love a Marriage in Trouble.
Where, especially since you do have professional pleasure where you meet them, you understand their dynamic, and you're like, oh yeah, they're great. And then you see them again, and you're like, oh, okay. It's different to be in like a love bubble than when like real life is actually happening. And like, how do you adapt to that?
How do you adapt? Yeah, like I feel like Professional Pleasure was very a lot of the reviews refer to it as like a very sweet, soft romance, which it is. Like it's not a lot of challenge. It's not a lot of their love isn't really challenged. It's kind of just like a can y'all just kiss already? And maybe that's why they kept talking in my head where it's just like, girl, we got more to say actually. And so like being able to like see like, can this connection stand the test of time, the test of fame, the test of all of this shit, right? And so it's one of my favorite things that I've ever written, even though it was written in like my earlier days where like I said, my talent was not as strong, but just the whole premise of let's see if this survives.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. And then I won't give any spoilers, but they both have to recognize what they are doing.
Yes, they do.
In order to get it together. That's what I do. Which I appreciated because it's not like an easy solution because the easy solution, I guess, is to say like, okay, we'll just break up. But then it's like, that's not actually what you want to do.
That's not what you think that you want that, but it's not what you want. And so and you know, like we talked about earlier, very headstrong female characters. And so like you get that in Calliope, and she is kind of teetering on it. Like, if you don't get your shit together, I am like, we're gonna dissolve all of this shit, right? Like, she never explicitly says that, but that's kind of the frame she's coming from. And like, from a woman's perspective, a career woman, a mother, you can kind of understand where she's coming from. But like, marriages are just they're not so black and white. It's a lot of nuance. And like, I really loved like putting that nuance in the book.
Yes. And then the fact that you potentially would have stopped there when Natalia and Tim were running around in the background,
doing whatever they want to do. Like, y'all not slick. We all know that you're doing something,
right? And I really appreciated reading their story, and just like their chemistry just like crackled the entire time.
It was so tense. It was so tense. And I loved it. It was just eating me alive the whole time I was writing it. I loved it.
Yeah, there was a few times I'm like listening while I'm driving. I was like, let me pause this, because if I'm listening to this, then I'm not paying attention to the road.
Because I'm like, how did I end up here? I was not even paying attention to nothing on the road, because I listen to them in the car sometimes. I'm like, I do not know how I got home. Because he over here talking to her real, you know.
Yes.
I'm wrapped up in that right now.
How is your approach different to creating Natalia and Tim's chemistry compared to Calliope and Brandon, as far as like what you wanted to showcase with them?
So with Calliope and Brandon, you know, obviously, like you said, it's a workplace romance. They work together. They already have knowledge of each other, like very intimate knowledge, not in terms of sex and romance, but like almost like best friends, right? And so like, I love the sensuality, the romance that exists between in certain friendships, and like their like relationship was kind of characterized by that, and it was kind of really just do we want to cross the line together? Because if we do, then we have to sever this working relationship, and that working relationship, as we saw, was just as important. And so like that was really the characterization of their romance. And then with Tim and Natalia, it's just like, here's this guy who, because of his traumas, is never going to, he doesn't take relationships serious. He's for the streets too. He's like a Mel Morgan, but not disrespectful with it, just in the like, I'm here for a good time, not a long time. Women can get whatever they want from me except a relationship. And they know that. And then you have this woman who, you know, potentially wants a relationship, but has her own trauma she's dealing with. And so for her, it's just like, I'm very focused on, and she's not necessarily headstrong and super independent, but like is learning to be those things, because in the past she wasn't, and that hurt her. So, you know, she got hurt by being what her mother called, you know, soft and vulnerable and ultra feminine. And so she's just like, well, I need to be the exact opposite of that, or like build on some mental muscle, some emotional strength, and be a little more independent, so a man can take advantage of me. And so then you bring these two people together, and they're super fucking attracted to each other, and they also have to work together. And it's the perfect storm.
Yes, perfect storm. That's what I'll say. And I'm just so interested as well to see what Portia's story will look like, because there's like some hints to things that she was going through in #currently untitled, but not really in any sort of detail. So I'm interested to see what
it's so good.
Yes. Okay. So
good.
I know she has a connection with Oliver, who will be in her story.
Yeah.
Can you tell me anything about what to expect?
I can give you a little bit of detail.
Okay.
So, you know, as we know, in executive entanglements, Brandon essentially he steps down as CEO of his company, and his sister at that time, she's got like 3 degrees. She's worked in a couple of different C-suite positions. And so he's like, she's the logical choice to replace me, and we can keep it in the family. And so, and then we know with currently entitled, Tim he owns his own private security firm. And so he offers security to his brother, and a couple of other like high profile clients. Is very protective of his sister. And so Portia's story starts with her stepping into her new role as CEO of Payout. And, formerly Payout is headquartered in Seattle, but now it's in New York. She moves it to New York. And so she's leaving the bird's nest, essentially. She's the baby. She has always been under the watchful eye of her brothers, especially Tim, who they are really close in age. And so like it is her kind of like branching out and like, not only am I stepping into this new role, but I'm doing it without y'all breathing over my shoulder. And so she is kind of rebellious too. And so like she keeps like she in her whole phase too. Like she's like she kind of has the same trauma Tim does. So she's like, I'm not interested in marriage. And so you see her like kind of skirt off of her security and like give them the slip so she can go do hoe activities. And her brother has had enough. He has had enough. And so essentially, once she's like steps into her role and it's announced to the world, she's getting all of this hate. She's a black woman CEO in tech of a almost $1 billion company. So of course she's hyper visible. We see how hyper visible black women get treated. And so like there's a lot of that theme in there. And then she gets attacked on a day that she slips her security. And so her brother's like, enough. You have 2 fucking options. Either I hire somebody who's going to come in here and really shut shit down, or you come back home. And so in walks Oliver, who is a retired Navy SEAL. He's older. He is very much not, you cannot give him the slip. Like it's just shutting shit down. And so it's really, really, really good. And it's exploring a lot of that theme of like black women being in control because that's all we know. And like what happens when you got somebody who can see that like you don't actually want to be in control. You just have no choice. So let me help you. And everything that comes from that. Because that can be a scary space. When like a man really sees you or a person who loves you really sees you and it's just like, you don't even have to say it. Right? I can see it, and not only can I see it, I am the solution. That's terrifying. And so like it deals with that. It's so good. It's so good. I cannot wait for y'all to read it. I can't.
I cannot wait. Oh, I'm excited about that.
She's so messy, and she be cussing her brothers out, and I love it because you get some of Brandon in there. You get some Calliope because Calliope's her publicist. You get Tim in there, of course, because Tim is Tim. So yeah, I love it. But you also get more of her mother. And that is also
we definitely needed more of
so now because a mother's relationship to her sons is always different from her relationship to her daughter. And so like we're seeing that complicated relationship but through the lens of her youngest child and her only daughter.
Yes, I am so excited. Whenever it is ready, I will be ready to read it. Clear everything out.
Give me about a month, and I think it'll be in your hands.
Okay, good. Okay. I'm really excited about that. And then the other books in the I Can Have It All series are narrated by the amazing Wesleigh Siobhan.
My girl did her thing. She did her thing.
And then Bible study has her as well.
Yes.
Like, can you tell me a little bit about like what that collaboration was like?
I love Wesleigh so much. Yeah. She can get whatever she wants from me, whatever her rate is, I will pay it.
Yes.
So I reached out to her for professional pleasure back in like 2022 or somewhere around there. And one second, Luca. Not at the moment. Go find Daddy. The answer is no, Luca. Also, I need you to stop knocking on the door. I'm in the middle of a chat, okay? Okay, in a minute. I'll open the door in a minute. All right, thank you. As I told you, now if that door was unlocked, he would have bust in here. Him and his friend, because he brought his Velcro friend. They would have just been back here all in the camera, girl. So I reached out to her. I had been following her on Instagram, and I had listened to a couple of books by her because I didn't used to like audiobooks. And then I found a Christina C. Jones book that she narrated, and I was like, I love her. I love this book. I love her talent. And so then I started following her, and I'm like, oh, she's like really big in the Black community. And so I was like, I feel like if I'm able to get her, then the book might reach a wider audience because she had already developed a really big audience. And so I just reached out to her in a DM on Instagram, like, hey, I'm interested. What does this process look like? I've never done an audiobook before. What are your rates? She told me her rates. I was like, perfect, let's do it. And then I just kept coming back. I saw such an immediate, like when I say immediate return on investment, because it's not cheap to produce audiobooks. And so like, it's a hefty investment you have to make, but her presence makes it worth it immediately. And so not just that, but like she also is just really, really good. And so like when I first listened to the audio files of Professional Pleasure, when she sent them, it was the first time I had experienced my book as a reader and not the person who wrote it. And like, I almost cried at how good it was. I was like, I have never been able to listen to this book or read this book and not think about everything that exists for me as the person who wrote it. And so like, I do listen to my books periodically on Audible because I'm able to experience them as a reader because of that narration. So as long as she is available and will have me, I will do it.
She's amazing. She is like one of my favorites. Her and Rashad, when she brings
when she gave that character a name, I said, oh, you're on to something, girl. You are on to something. Absolutely.
Right. I'm like, I don't even know what she couldn't narrate and like help support elevating the storytelling and the tension and all of the things with it. And then I know with Bible study, Miles Washington is a part of it as well. So you have the dual narration. So what was the thought process of like bringing him in, since Wesleigh had been doing your previous books?
So it was me just kind of like paying attention to the market, right? And being like, because I still would have just went with Wesleigh. Like, girl, you could do both Preston and Genesis, and we are gonna love it.
Yes.
But I had met him at he was at Black Romance. No, not Black. He was at Black Romance Book Fest, but I met him when I was helping out an author friend at Indie Love last year, and he had came over to her table and introduced himself. And so I was like, okay, and then I'm like, obviously I'm like in reader spaces seeing like, okay, who do the girls like? What do these people sound like when they're narrating certain kinds of characters? And then, Wesleigh has her own production company. And so through there, I did auditions for the male narrator. And his was one that I listened to. And I was like, yeah, this is Preston. This is what it sounds like. And also a huge return on investment immediately.
Yes.
Like it brought in another chunk of readers who did not know I existed. Not didn't know I existed, but like hadn't read or listened to a book by me. But because their favorite narrator or a narrator they really like is on the project.
Yes. It definitely draws folks in. And I really enjoyed being able to reread Bible study through the audio because it's definitely different, just like a rereading in general, and being able to like pick up certain things where it's like I already know how the story goes, but like I see it a little bit differently. I know that there's like a lot of conversation about like readers who gravitate to audio and like read primarily like audiobooks. Like, what is something that you would want readers to know about like all that goes into actually making a book into audio that they may not know or may not expect?
So one, it is very, very expensive. That is first and foremost. readers need to understand it, like it is very expensive, and for most of us, it is an out-of-pocket expense. You do have options where you can like do royalty share, but I just, with all of the Audible news, I think they're kind of doing away with the royalty share, which is kind of where they foot the bill up. They fit the upfront cost, and then your royalty is less.
Gotcha.
Or you can kind of like give your audio rights to someone like Podium or Tantor, and they'll produce it. But if you want like full creative control, you want to be able to choose narrators, you want the most out of your royalty that you can get, then it's a cost that you have to pay, and you have to pay it up front for most narrators, and it is not cheap. The overhead price to produce a paperback or an ebook, very, very low compared to audiobooks. So that, and then also it is a process. And so like I reached out to Wesleigh about Bible study. Last year was 2024, right? No, last year was 2025. I reached out to her about Bible study in like January, and she wasn't able to record until October. And so like there's also, you know, like I can't just say, hey, I want to put this in. I can go find another narrator, but if I want to use a certain narrator and that narrator is booked and busy, as she usually is, then I got to get in line. So I think that what readers should know, or listeners, is it's not that we don't want to, because I would love for every single book in my catalog to be on audio, and it will eventually, but it is a process. It's a process, and it's not cheap.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Because I know a lot of us, again, like I said, like audio, like I love an audio and switch off and things like that. But it is definitely much more complex than like you can just pull an audiobook out of the sky. So.
and you can't, there are always options. I have recording equipment. I could absolutely do it myself, but the experience is not the same as if somebody like Wesleigh, who this is what she does. This is what they do. I can't narrate the book. I can read the book to you, but I cannot narrate the book. So like for people like you and other readers who love a true like oral experience with the book, like if you are the more patience you have, the better, because I'm also considering, like, with projects moving forward, releasing all of the platforms at the same time. And so like the day that the paperback and the ebook are released, you also get the audio, but that requires a lot of planning on the front end. And so I feel like as long as like readers are patient and like understanding that, like I'm not working on it.
Yes.
And just be ready. Have that card ready.
Yes.
Okay. And know that it's coming. But you got, and so like just that patience, because I also love a good audiobook. And certain books, once I read them, I'm like, oh, I need to hear this in audio. I need to hear it. So I get it. I definitely understand, because I prefer physical copies, but I'm also, with certain books, I'm like, I need it.
Yeah, definitely. If you were to overhear a reader raving about your work, like just saying all of the best things, what 3 words would you want to hear them say?
Oh. I like the word authentic. About me. I like that used about me. Like, I come across, I do not search my name. I don't go looking for things. And I see everything that I'm tagged in, of course, but like a lot of times, because how the algorithm works, I come across stuff where I see my name, but I'm not tagged. And so I read those things. I'm like, because the universe wouldn't have put it here if they didn't want me to see it. And so I see the kind of things that people say about me, and I love it. Okay. I love it, because it means that I am very on brand. And a big part of my brand as an author, I'm a very like forward facing brand. So you don't just know Tia Love books, you know Tia Love. Not necessarily Tia Love the Benedetto, but you know Tia Love. And so when I come across the other day, I saw a post and she was talking about she called me really pretty, and I was like,
yes,
thanks, you know. And so like I'm not going to pretend that I'm not vain. I am. And so like that is something I love to hear, and not like in a the most gorgeous woman ever, but like I put a lot of effort into how I show up in my online space, which is why I asked you earlier, do I need to put my eyebrows on? Because I don't want to pop up on here and look like the hell I've been through with these kids. I want to look like what people expect from me. So like hearing that, I love to hear people talk about #currently untitled. I do, because it's my favorite. And so like when people are talking about that, I love it. And then I also love, I don't know if there's a specific phrase or word, but I love when my writing style is complimented. And different readers say different things about it, but I love, because I believe that I'm in the reader space and I'm in the author space. And so like I know that there are lots of readers who only focus on certain aspects of the book, right? Like whether it's the main male character or the female character, or it's the plot, or it's, you know, it's this thing here or this trope. And that's all great, but like because I focus and I study craft so seriously, when I hear like, oh, I love how she writes, I love her writing style, I love the rhetorical devices she uses, the choices she makes for her writing, that is probably like the highest compliment somebody could pay me as a writer, because I try really, really hard to make sure that when I'm writing a book, it sounds like me. And not like, and this is never any shade to anybody else, but not like any other book. And I understand the business decision that a lot of authors make when all of the books, they blend. They tend to blend into each other because people are writing to market, because the market is how you get paid. And so I get that. But I don't write to market. I write based on the characters that start talking to me and all of that. And so like when somebody reads the book and they're like, I love how she wrote this, I love this writing style. Great. I have 10 other books for you to read in the same writing style.
Yes.
That's how I know I've made a fan, if you love my writing style. Because if you just love Bible study because you love Preston and Genesis, that's okay. You probably might not like everything else. And that's okay too. Like I have just as much respect and value for that reader as I do for the reader who's like, I love her writing style, give me everything else she wrote.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I can definitely tell you, I love your use of language. Like I highlight so many things just because of like the turn of the phrase, and I'm like, oh, that was so good.
I love a good phrase. I love a good phrase. Listen, and when like the notes app on my phone is like just a collection. I have like a book idea folder, and it's just a collection of turn of phrases. Of like, I have no idea when this is going to be said, where it's going to go, but it's in my mind, and I know it's going to hit. And so, thank you for picking up on that.
Yes, like I am someone where like if I'm reading, like I like gravitate to the Kindle because I don't personally like writing in book. I feel like that's against the law. And what people do in their own homes, that's their business. I cannot.
So what you're saying is you don't want an annotated copy of Bible study from me. That's what you're saying?
If you've written it, yes. I cannot bring the pen to the page and write in the book. I use all these other like transparent stickies and stuff anyway. But I'm like, I like highlight so many things where it's just like, I just like how this came together as far as these words came together. And you have like so many moments that happens too. And I'm like, just like, I don't know if anyone else would be highlighting this, but I just love how
you want to be able to come back to it.
Yes. Right? How this comes together. What, like, as you're thinking about just like you as a writer and your career, like, how do you want your stories to be remembered by readers?
I want them to be timeless. So I want them to be stories that you can come back to over and over again. Like I want to be able to go back and reread things I've written and not cringe because, and so I want them to be timeless. But I more than that, I want them to be soft places for Black women to land and work through the shit that we go through as Black women in living here with all these other people. It's a soft place to explore those things and explore them and also feel what love is like. If you don't have it, if you're in search of it, whatever. And also I want it to serve as like a another compliment I like to get. This is, y'all know you said 3 things, but this is the 4th thing I'm adding. Is when a reader's just like, this book made me believe in XYZ. Yes. Please view this as secondary research. Absolutely. So I want it to be timeless. I want it to be a soft place for Black women to land, but also a place almost kind of like a not a guide, but just like something that shows you what's possible. All of the available options and possibilities.
Yes, definitely. And you can have all of those options still being you. Like you don't have to be somebody else.
You do not have to be nobody else. Just be yourself. It's somebody out there who wants to drink your bathwater. I promise. I promise. It might be somebody's, depending on what you got going on. So,
be open.
Be open. Be open. That's it.
As you're thinking about like potentially future projects, since you said you have like a notes list of like different ideas and thoughts and things like that, are there any genres or tropes that you haven't written yet that you would love to explore?
I keep returning to dark romance. And then I also, I'm not sure what the genre is, whether it's fantasy, paranormal, or what, but I also outlined a 3-book series that is like they're fairy tale retellings. And so the first one is The Little Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Wolf. And so I don't know what genre it is. I don't know if it's paranormal. I don't know but like I'm also in that space over there. And so those are 2 things I currently have outlined. I've got that outlined, and then I've got like a darker, not like super dark. It's definitely not as dark as it could be, just because I got to write from my level of comfortability. But definitely darker than I'm currently doing. And so that's where I'm headed, I think. Who knows who's going to start talking once I finish this book. But that's what I've outlined so far.
Gotcha. I love both of those. I'm also just like, I could take any sort of fairy tale retelling, like literally.
I do, especially in Black.
I
love them so much. I do. And I love all of the like unique. That's another thing where like a writing style comes into play for me. And so like, I don't know if you've read Wonder by Christina C. Jones.
Yes.
Girl, it just got delivered on Friday. I'm cracking it open tonight. Okay, I listened to it a long time ago, but I need the physical copy. But the way she wrote that, and I was like, Christina C. Jones is like my modern Eric Jerome Dickey. I'm just put that out there. Just in how vast her catalog is and how it covers so many different tropes, genres, all of that. And so if I was ever to like look at somebody and be like, she is the blueprint. And so when I started outlining mine, I'm like, okay, I don't know if other writers come and run up against this, but like I run into a lot of times where, because I'm not a plot driven writer, that doesn't make sense for the plot. Right. And I'm just like, who gives a fuck? It's your book. Like it doesn't have to make sense. Right. And so like reading books like Wonder and seeing like, oh, you took a lot of shit and you flipped it. You didn't even flip it on its head. You pushed it out the book. And so like seeing that in action and seeing another author take those kinds of risks makes me feel, and I'm still going to be scared when I publish it and be like, people might chew me up for this, but also,
why not?
Why not? it's how the story is unfolding in my head, and if I'm staying true to me, which I always try to do when I'm writing, then that's how the story is going to get told. It's just, this is what the characters was talking about. This is the decision that made sense to me. And I'm hoping that, you know, when the readers pick it up, they also, you know, even if it doesn't make sense, you're just like, okay, cool, whatever. It's Tia. I love her writing.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I cannot wait for whenever that will come into the world.
Yes, girl.
Yes. So I will definitely be very excited to read that.
Thank you.
And I know you'll be at Black Romance Book Festival this year.
I'm excited.
Yes. How are preparations going? Anything you're like most excited about the second year?
Now, preparation wise, I'm panicking just a little bit because I have like 4 or 5 times more pre-orders than I did last year, which is a really good sign. Like, I could not be more grateful for every single reader who supported me in the last year, and for Bible study, and my throwaway idea being not a throwaway idea.
Right.
I just placed the order for all of my books, and so they should be here soon. And I'm really excited to meet everybody. That's what I love the most about book events, is like meeting all of the readers and like hearing, you know, some of them come talk to me and tell me what a certain book did for them, and I love it. I live for that experience. And so I have a lot of social anxiety too, but I'm gonna have me a little drink and it's gonna be okay.
Yes.
It's gonna be okay.
Yes, it will be. And then there's also that that reading room or that quiet space where it's like you can kind of like duck off.
Yep.
You need to be like, actually, I've peopled enough.
But you know what? I will just go back to my room. I'll go back to my room. I'll see you guys later. I'm gonna go get some food, maybe do some shopping. But I also, as a reader, there are tons of authors there who I want to see, and so like it's also kind of navigating that too. Like, I saw CCJ last year twice. I saw her at the house party, and I saw her at Indie Love when I was helping my friend, and so I got my hug. I got to meet my hero. Yay. And you know, and I love that. I feel like an idiot because I did not place a pre-order, but it's fine. I'm her Patreon. I'm assuming she'll do another book sale at some point. It's fine. I'm not panicking about that, and I'll be okay if I'm not able to hug her again because I did that, right? But like, there's so many others. Brenda Jackson's gonna be there. She was the first romance author I ever read, the Black romance author I ever read. So like, I'm hoping that I have the opportunity. Last year I got to chat with Beverly Jenkins outside of the hotel for like an hour, just unprompted, out of the blue. And so like, I'm excited for whatever Black Romance Book Fest is going to give me this year, because it gave me so much last year.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see you, and I hope it gives you all the good things this year. Yes, definitely. So how can readers like me support you? What would be the best things for us to do?
So find me on social media. I am active most on Threads and Instagram at Author Tia Love everywhere. I love when readers talk to me. As long as we're all speaking respectfully, I love when readers reach out to me. I love being tagged in reviews, all of those things. Like, I'm here for you know, that conversation. I love seeing how y'all interpret the things that I write. I love that. I have a newsletter you can subscribe to. It's where I usually release things first. You can sign up through my website, tialove.co. Those are the best ways. And then like, you can buy me on Amazon. You can buy from me directly. I encourage readers to do what works for them.
Okay.
Because accessibility is so important to me. And so I can't tell somebody, well, I'm not over here, at least not at this point in my career. When I do new releases at this point in my career, I do release on my website first. I do eventually release wider, but if you are interested in being the first to have something from me, I always release through my website first. And so it's best to be subscribed to my newsletter.
Gotcha. Okay. Yes, everyone should be subscribed. It is a free way to support and get the news, and then you can get all of the sneak peeks that are available, so you can start
I
planning
sent out
your
a sneak
reading
peek for Portia's
accordingly.
interlude a couple weeks ago. So
Yes.
And you can reply to them emails too. I read all of those. I respond if it calls for that. So yes, I love interacting with my read. I do. I love y'all.
Yay. Well, I love you as well. Thank you so much for joining me. I
Thank
appreciate being
you.
able to dig a little bit into your catalog and see what's next, because I will be reading. I still have some books in your catalog I need to go back to read. I need to go back to Langston Lake, which I will.
And so have you going back to Mighty and Marie, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a lover boy. That is a lover boy. I'm excited for you.
I need to go back over there, and then whenever anything is ready, I'm just gonna put it on my calendar and just block it off and say,
there we go.
I need to go ahead and
I'll let y'all know when Portia's interludes come, but we're trending June. We're trending June. So
okay, that's great. All right. Well, thank you so much. And I hope you have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.